Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to this week's live chat, the first live chat of 2025. We are coming to you live from the Kansas City area. Jessica and I are in snowy Kansas City, Liberty area. We finally got snow, which I love. Jessica doesn't love it as much, but wherever you are, I hope you're doing well. The weather is crazy everywhere, and we're definitely sending our prayers out to everybody in California affected by the fires. That's just horrifying to watch. But I'm excited to be here talking about my favorite thing, quilting, and answering your questions live. So if you're watching me live right now, Jessica is here as always behind the camera, monitoring the chat, and she'll write down your questions and give them to me at the end. If you're not watching live, no worries. Just leave them in the comments from time to time. I get on there and answer them. Also, other quilters answer them as well. So super excited for today's live chat. So usually every Thursday about this time, I go live and I talk for about 30 minutes about something quilting related. But this is a special one because we just launched our new Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series. So the next few live chats will be kind of recapping, answering your questions about the previous week's tutorials and just making sure we're all loving the swirl design as much as I am. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, just check out my YouTube. We have a new video series all about machine quilting swirls. And the first videos just came out on Tuesday. So this first week was a little bit different because I had two videos. So we talked about the basics of quilting a swirl and then how to use it in background areas and blocks, kind of how you work your way through an area. And so in this live chat, I'm just going to kind of recap what I talked about. Maybe if I have an additional pointer, but definitely answering your questions live. That's one thing I love to do. I want to make sure you're as successful with the design as possible. So super excited about all of that. So let's jump right into the goodness. So like I said, we're doing the mastering swirls. It's so funny, just to stop real quick. When I put together a challenge, it's like I have the design process and the launching of it is like a big date, like the selling the panel and announcing all that stuff. Oh, that's a big one. And then actually having the videos come out is like the second biggest day. So it's kind of like a celebration around here. Even though we didn't come into work because it was snowy, I was like, oh, the first video went out, super fun. So I'm just super excited for everybody that watches along and quilts along with me. I really appreciate your support and I love doing it. So much fun. All right, just to recap on kind of what we're going to be talking about, we saw the swirls one, and then we're going to move each Tuesday into another video tutorial and kind of build off of that swirl design. I'm showing you how to do it on a sewing machine. I'm demonstrating it on a long arm. There's no reason you can't do it. So if you've ever wanted to quilt swirls, this is your opportunity. So I hope that you enjoy quilting along with me. First of all, I want to talk about something new this time around. So every challenge I feel like comes up with something different and some kind of reiteration of it. But we do have a new website, which I just found out is triggering some people's malware. So hopefully that's not happening. When you go, click the link in the description box or you go to the website to the Free Motion Challenge, if you want to watch the videos, they are always on my YouTube channel, but you can also go to my website and check them out there. You'll scroll down to where it says watch the videos, and then you'll click on that button. So the arrow says click on the button. In the past, what I've done is had each kind of video be its own page. I don't know, listen, computer stuff is not my thing. And so I've tried it all different ways, but this one's a little bit different. When you click on that, it's gonna pop up this page and it's gonna be like a class format. So if you've ever taken an online class, you're probably comfortable with this format. All the videos are listed right there. I just kind of wanna spell it out because it could be confusing if you've never, if you've done previous challenges and not seen this. So all the videos are going to be in that same place. You'll just kind of scroll down and see them as they come out. Right now, the ones that aren't out yet, just say coming soon. So once you find your way there, that's where you're going to go to find all the videos. Or like I said, you can go to my YouTube channel as well. Another thing that's different for this time around is all of the free quilting diagrams are all finished and in one PDF. Y'all, this is kind of epic. I am notorious for like last minute get it done. Jessica's nodding her head behind there because she gets to deal with the stress and angst that comes with that. But this time I got them all done ahead of time and it's in one PDF. Right? So you just download one PDF and be done with it. So super excited about that. I'm feeling like I'm adulting pretty hard right now. Like, is this how grown-up people feel? Because I feel very like on top of things. In addition to that, I put together an expanded resource PDF. Now, this is something I've done in prior challenges, having the additional PDFs that you can purchase, just because they take me so much longer to put together, and that's how I monetize my time. So if you need a little bit more help, you want more step-by-step instructions, you want more pictures, more tips, and this is going to be the way to do it. And I also have all the expanded resource PDFs for all the videos in one PDF file. So super exciting. That was, it's like writing a book is what it kind of felt like, but it's done. So if you do want a little bit more help, you can check that out. Like I said, it just has more instructions, more pictures, a little bit more deep dive into it. Not everybody will need it, but if you're struggling with the swirl design, or you're like, I just really like to have this thing next to me, then check it out. It's $8.99 and you get over 30 pages of PDF. So anyway, check those out. And once you download it, you don't have to download it again because you only have one for the whole video series. If you purchase the expanded resource PDF, you don't need the free quilting diagrams. That's included in there. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, free or the expanded resource. All right. Throughout this video series, we're focusing 100% on swirls, really kind of diving into it. And so the first video, or the first part of the challenge, has to be, well, how the design goes together. So coming out with 2 videos just kind of made it a little bit easier in my mind to mentally break it up. I didn't want somebody that already knows how to quilt swirls but wants to use them in different ways to have to watch that part. So if you've never quilted them or you want a few tips, you can watch that first Quilting Swirls one, and then second video, how to use it in blocks and backgrounds. Now, in the swirl video, one thing that I said, and I want to reiterate it here, if you already have your swirl style, don't change it. The worst thing you can do is be like, I want to try doing it this way. That's like trying to change your handwriting. Don't worry about that. So if you already have a way that you do it, stick with it. But if you don't, that video is kind of showing you, here's how the design goes together. Here's some common troubleshooting ideas. Here's how the design works. Now, the sad part is it does take practice. I mean, if it didn't take practice, it wouldn't be worth learning, I suppose. So if you're struggling, I promise, keep after it. It will come together. But I did give some troubleshooting, like, common quilter frustrations. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to make these mistakes, but in the years of teaching classes, that's something I've seen. These are the things I've seen in a lot of different classes. So kind of things that I've made mistakes with. So when we saw how to quilt the design, I also kind of showed like, here's some common frustrations. So first of all, when you're learning a design, you're trying to remember all the different things, and I get it. It's hard to remember. But if you notice that your swirls are going in one direction, you're like, they're kind of just not meandering around like they should. They're just moving in a row. That means you're not echoing enough. Don't forget to echo. Echoing is what's really going to help you move your way around an area. And I know when we're learning something new, we're like, really focusing and stressing out about it. It's easy to forget about the echoing. So one thing that I would say, and I don't think I said this in the video, if you struggle with remembering to echo, just give yourself a routine. Swirl, swirl, echo. Swirl, swirl, echo. Something like that, and that will help you maneuver in all different directions so you get that beautiful overall texture. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, look, I'm quilting them in a straight line and I'm totally fine with that, and that's perfectly fine. But as we start using this design on actual quilts or on our class panel, we're going to need to be able to maneuver our way around an area. So we're kind of baby stepping towards that. So definitely something good to get in your mind right off the bat. All right, how about that inconsistent spacing? All right, y'all, this comes with practice. Everything comes down to practice. If you see this, it just means that maybe the spacing between your echo lines is a little further apart than your swirls, and that's okay. It will totally work itself out. But once you get more comfortable, once you can keep that consistent spacing, you're going to see an overall texture, and you're not going to see the individual swirls. Now, I almost turned it into a drinking game. Like, how many times can I say texture in a video? Overall texture. That just was like something I kept saying when I was filming, and I didn't realize. But when I'm looking at the swirls, in this example or this part of the class, we just want to see all of them together. We don't want one standing out more than the other. And so keeping the spacing consistent will help that. I love to use the foot of my machine as a guide. Running the foot of my machine along that previously quilted line will help me keep that spacing consistent. Now, really that only helps if I'm using a round quilting foot. If you have like one that's more oval, your echo lines might be a little closer at one side and further apart on the other. I promise it will work itself out, but just keep going, keep filling in that area. I promise it's gonna look good. And then if your swirls aren't looking right, now this is one I almost like didn't include because there is no right way to quilt swirls. Quilt a curve, some shape, do it over and over again, it's gonna be fine. But if you're trying to emulate what I'm showing in the video, if you're getting swirls that don't look quite right, it could be because you're not finishing the swirl before moving on, right? And I'm going to use my hand motions, which is not really going to help you, but I'm going to quilt my first curl and then echo back out and then go into my next one. Very common, especially with newer quilters, we'll do the first part and then just go right into the next, and we get these kind of waves, which are totally fine. But just pointing out that if you want it to look like the other, that's going to be what will help you do that. And then the infamous squared swirls. Dun, dun, dun. Number one, common frustration, common asked question about swirls. Every new quilter struggles with these. If you learned how to quilt swirls and you never struggle with that, don't tell anybody else. Nobody wants to know. No, it's going to work itself out with practice, I promise. The more comfortable you get with the design, the more fluidly you'll be able to move through that shape and the more momentum you'll have. Usually though, and I said this I think I said it in the video, if not, I meant to, I can't critique everybody because I can't see what you're doing, but most often quilters are going too slow. So if you find that you're quilting really slow, maybe moving a little bit quicker will help you get that curve down. I know it sounds kind of like, counterintuitive. If I just slow down and try really hard, I'll get a nice swirl. That's actually not the case. So try speeding up just a little bit. Not so much that you're out of control, but definitely fast enough that you can't critique the job you're doing while you're doing it. So that's kind of the rule of thumb I give there. It will work itself out. Don't get frustrated. If you're to this point, think, hey, I'm almost there. I just got to refine that shape. So I promise, very common. Everybody struggles with it. It will get better. Now, after the first video, then I kind of focused on how are we going to use this swirl on the quilts. This is something I think I say in a lot of my videos and live chats. Like, it's one thing to know how to quilt a design. It's a totally different thing to know how and where to use it on your quilts. I mean, has anybody done that where you're quilting a swirl on your sample and you're like, it looks good, and I go to my quilt and I just can't, right? We have to learn how to actually use that design on our quilts. And so the second video is kind of like, all right, now let's take that shape and learn how do we work our way through an area. This is something that will help you so much when you get working on other quilts, right? So whether it is a background area, a little area, whether it's the whole quilt, you're still going to have to be able to work your way through that area, filling in all the gaps. And that was the main point that I was really trying to hit with the second video, and I hope that it landed, because it is kind of an abstract thought. But when we're working through background areas or filling in really any area, I kind of went through in the expanded resource PDF and kind of broke it down. Step one, define the area. Now, I know that's so obvious, and I said that in the video. Okay, I know what area, but sometimes just saying, all right, I want to fill in this area, I want to start here, and I want to end here. And then that is your game plan. That's how you're going to work your way through. Depending on how you're working through the quilts, the point you start at might just be where I ended up. This is where I came into the area, and this is how I'm going to work my way through it. So on the panel, on the exclusive panel for the challenge, we kind of saw me fill in this area. And I went through and just took a couple screenshots of the video so you could see it progress. As you're filling in the areas, take your time, think through, I want to fill in any gaps before I move on. It's very much like mopping a floor. That's the best analogy I have for that. You know, when you mop a floor, you mop everywhere but the doorway so that you can get out. And it's the same thing with the quilting. So once I start, I'm quilting my swirls and I'm using that echoing, remember, to move my way around the area and fill it in as much as possible. Now, depending on the quilt and the area you're working on, you may have to work around obstacles. And this is where it gets fun. Not tricky, a lot of fun. As you fill in around blocks and other quilting designs, you're going to have to get comfortable with maneuvering your way through an area. So in the challenge, or at the end, I said, if you're quilting along with me, outline some of the shapes on the panel and use it as an obstacle to quilt around. Unless you're like freaked out by that, then don't worry about it. But once I'm quilting an area, when I get to a part, when I hit an obstacle, I need to decide, am I going to fill this in and move on, or do I have to fill it in and come back? Do I need an escape route, right? How am I going to work my way through here? And so as we work through, you can see here I'm kind of quilting along that triangle. I've left myself room to come back out. So a lot of it is just kind of being aware, like, oh, I'm going to hit a dead end here in a second. I need to leave myself room to get back out of there. Now, what happens if you don't do that? Well, congratulations, you're completely normal. You're going to get stuck. Everybody gets stuck from time to time. Just travel, echo, get out of there, do whatever you can, and move on. I promise when you're done, you're not going to see those spots. It's going to blend in. But here we can see I'm working my way along the bottom of my obstacle, and I know that I'm going to fill it all the way up as I'm moving my way out. So again, just two different areas. Am I going out and coming back, or am I filling it up and moving on? You can always pause, take your time, think through the next couple steps as you're filling in that area. And worst case scenario, if there is a gap, then you just go back in and fill it in. It's going to be fine. But something I say a lot in my videos is I think people will notice a gap in the quilting before they notice an error. So as long as you fill that whole thing in, it's going to look fine. I promise. Even if you don't believe me, you got to keep going. And so on the class panel, I had you kind of fill in this area with the swirl design, filling it in and working around those obstacles should you choose to do that. So that was kind of the challenge. Now, we also saw how to quilt design or swirls in blocks. Now, this was very specific to the panel. I designed the panel so that it had some spaces in the middle to work like blocks, but it's something that you can apply to quilt blocks of a lot of different shapes. Depending on the size or the shape of that block, you can quilt one swirl so that it centers in that. It's a great way to quilt smaller flying geese, triangles or diamonds, or any kind of shape that's wider in the middle and pointier at the top and bottom. I feel like that's kind of my body shape a little bit, but that one swirl just hits that middle perfectly there. So using swirls in multiple areas of your quilts is just easier, at least in my opinion. I already kind of have swirls on my mind. I'm already kind of working with the curves, and it does give the quilting a little bit of a cohesion. It kind of pulls it all together. So using swirls in the background and in the blocks, not only is it fun, but it just looks good too. So really, this is my persuasive argument to make you love the swirl design. Look what kind of fun things it can do. It can fill in the background. It can fill in the blocks. It's amazing. So that's kind of where we ended that second video, just kind of on those blocks. We saw the swirl, and then I threw in a little hook or two. Now, if you haven't quilted along with me yet, if this is your first time, I try to show like a little, not a harder option, but just a different application of the design. So I'm trying to hit everybody where they are in their skill set. So we saw how we could use echoing to make blocks a little bit easier to manage, and then also how we can fill in those irregular shapes. So again, as you're working through your quilt tops that you may or may not have laying around at your house, look at those blocks and see if you can't fit in the swirl designs. I think you might be surprised to find out that you can. So just some close-up pictures of that. So we can see in the longer bit, just put some extra swirls. In the single one, just one. Just depends on how much you want to quilt it and kind of the look that you're going for. All right, in this week's challenge, I just want to kind of spend not a little time on it, I just want to kind of show it again. Since we're working through this panel, it's not so much block-based, right? It's kind of this pictorial thing. So I've kind of broke it up into pieces. So if you need suggestions on what to fill and where, I just did the two outer portions of that center and then just in between all that center motif. You do not have to quilt it the way I show it. You don't have to quilt it in the order I show it. You can do whatever you want. But I know that quilters sometimes like to have a roadmap to follow. So if you need a rule to follow, you can follow that rule. So, and then we can see the quilted sample there. Now, if you're just kind of hearing about this, you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It's still, you can still quilt along with me on the panel. I designed this quilt panel so that we can quilt together on this project. And then when we're done, we can look at it and be so proud of how far we've come. Now, I know that some of you are scared of messing up your panel. Let me encourage you to start quilting your panel. I designed the panels so you wouldn't have to use quilt tops, but that's neither here nor there. I'll let you wrestle with that. So that's kind of where we ended the first challenge. Now, that's kind of a bunch to pick up, especially if you're newer to quilting and especially if you haven't quilted the swirl design a whole lot. Give yourself grace and just work through it. I promise it just takes a little bit of practice, and the more and more you do it, the better it's going to get. So that's a lot of talking. All right, some questions. I wrote down a few, but I'm sure Jessica has a bunch of them over there. I almost said something different. First of all, somebody said I get on the type chat before we start. I get on the live chat and we type chat. I don't know the right words to say for that, but usually about half an hour before I go live, and that's just a fun way to connect with other quilters. And I wrote down some questions. First of all, somebody said I make it look so easy in the videos. Yeah, if I didn't make it look easy, you wouldn't want to learn it, right? Have you ever watched a tutorial for anything and you're like, oh, how to do this? And you're like, yeah, I don't want to do that ever, right? So I make it look easy because I've had a little bit of practice. And so don't be, discouraged, be inspired. I promise you can do it just a practice. All right, Corrine asked, what do I love quilting on more, a sewing machine or a long arm? Because in the videos I show both. The long arm is just a pretty quick thing. It's just like a little visual. But I love quilting on the long arm more, only because I learned how to machine quilt on it. I went right from hand quilting to long arming and then went back and taught myself how to quilt on a sewing machine. So I like to say that long arming is my first language and the sewing machine is my second. But you can definitely do it on your sewing machine. There's pluses and minuses to both. Kathy asked, how do I slow down my brain when I'm quilting so I can focus on the swirl I'm quilting instead of worrying about what is ahead? Great question. And I joked in the type chat, wine always helps, right? Distracts your brain. No, I'm only half serious there. When you're learning something new, there's just a lot to take in and there's a lot to think about. Keep going. I promise. I can't say it enough. I promise to keep going because you'll be able to do it. Think about learning how to drive a car. I remember first driving, you're hanging on to the steering wheel. You're like freaking out. Now I can drive and, drink and slap somebody in the back seat if I need to. So it comes with practice, I promise. All right. Gail asked, and this is a great question, tips for using 2 different thread colors. So we'll just kind of talk about threads for a second. Picking out thread colors is such a subjective thing. There is no rule. You do whatever you like. But the question was, if I use a different color on top and a different color on the bottom in the bobbin thread, can I set the tension to where they won't show up on the top or bottom? So, for example, if I was using black thread on top and white thread on bottom, can I set it so that it wouldn't show? It's really difficult. It's really hard to keep perfect tension the whole time. So just know that if you do that, you might get little pokies or areas that it shows up or down. Now, that's something I've said before, but I do feel like I need to add a little caveat to this. Once you get comfortable with tension and quilting, you'll know which way you can cheat things to have it look good. So if I were quilting a quilt with a white top and a black backing, I would maybe cheat my tension just a bit to where if I were to have like pokies, they would be on the back and not on the front. Also, if I'm using a fabric that's really busy backing fabric that you can't see the quilting anyway, I don't even worry about it. I just use the same color of the whole thing. So really for the challenges, and especially because when I'm quilting, it's a quilt for me. I'm not putting it in a show. I put one thread color in the bobbin and just change the top thread. So there's no right or wrong answer though. I want to give you the encouragement to know that you can use 2 different thread colors. You can use the same thread color. It's totally fine. Just kind of give you an idea there. And a follow-up question was, well, if you do match your thread colors, do you change your bobbin each time? Sure. If you want to, if I change my top thread, I can change my bobbin color. You can ask 10 different quilters and you'll get 10 different answers of how they like to do it. So usually I try to find, if I'm going to use just one thread color in the bobbin for the whole quilt, is there a neutral that's very similar to the backing fabric so that you won't see it if there are some tucks? So hopefully that helps. There was a question about which thread colors to use where on the panels, and I realized I didn't really specify that. So I'll try to put together some kind of graphic for the next live chat to go over that. So, all right, I'm getting stuck. Do the swirls curl go in opposite directions you want to go rather than towards where you want to go? I don't even think about where I want to go. I quilt my swirl, I finish it, and then if I need to get back to the other side, that's when I use echoing to do that. All right, so you could think about it, you know, like, oh, if I'm heading left, maybe I quilt my swirl to the right. Sure, I mean, that definitely will help. And I think that's something that will begin to happen when you get comfortable with it. But in the beginning, don't worry about it. Truly, quilt your swirl, finish that swirl, and stop and think, where do I need to go next? And then either use echoing to get there or quilt your next one. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm using a little Rebel on a breeze and I'm having trouble making smaller swirls. Any suggestions? No worries. We all have I don't know how to explain it, but like a scale of quilting that we just naturally do. Some new quilters tend to quilt really small off the bat and some quilt really big. Don't fight it too hard. You know, if you can't quilt smaller swirls, just quilt whatever you will quilt and work your way through it. Then once you learn the design, then you'll be able to shrink them or make them bigger. Don't worry about the size so much when you're practicing. Kind of like when we learned how to handwrite or write our letters, our teachers weren't like critiquing the size of our letters, just making sure we had the letter correct, and then more you can practice. So hopefully that helps. Should I add the borders on first before quilting? Yes. So if you purchase the optional border panel with optional borders with the quilt panel, it came with instructions on how to do it. And in the instructions, I say add the borders, then make your quilt sandwich, and then get ready to quilt your little heart out. So yes, add your borders first. If you haven't added them and you already started quilting, I think you can still piece them on it real quick if you want to. Where can I find the free PDF and the expanded PDF? Well, you have to come to my quilt shop. It's here in Liberty. If you don't live in, no, I'm just kidding. If you click the link in the description box below, or go click any of the links in the emails, or go to my website, you'll see the free motion challenge. Go into the video. Remember I showed you in the beginning of the live chat where I said click in to look at the videos? The free resources are right under there. If you have trouble, you can always email us and we'll send you a direct link, but it's on there. Is traveling to get to another area okay? Absolutely. Yes. Travel along that previously quilted line, get on out. If the traveling isn't perfectly on top, call it echoing and get on out. I'll travel along what I've quilted. I'll travel along the edge of a seam. Sometimes I'll just cheat right across my quilting because I know you can't really see it anyway. So don't stress out too much about that. What color thread are we starting out with? So that was a good question. That was the one I kind of touched on. So I'll put together a graphic, but in those outer portions, I used purple towards the top, and then I used the green towards the center, but really either one of those colors will work good there. I'll put together some kind of graphic for next week's live chat so you can see it. Do I recommend using a high contrast thread to start? It depends. Using a high contrast thread is great because you can see where you're going, and that really helps you learn the design. But I know a lot of quilters get so easily discouraged that sometimes when you use high contrasting thread or a thread color that's really different than your quilt top, it can be discouraging because you can see every bump and bobble. So if you're like, I don't want to feel bad, I'm already nervous, maybe use something with just a little bit of contrast. So if it's a white fabric, maybe a light gray. Another thing that you can do when you're quilting quilts with thread color that blends in and you can't really see it, turning off your overhead light and putting some light to the side will cast a shadow so you can see where you're going. So yes, use a thread color that contrasts if you won't let it keep you from keeping on. Does that make sense? Hopefully so. All right, you all, great questions. I love doing this. The next video is going to come out on Tuesday, and we're going to learn 2 swirl variations. Now, there's 1.5 million different swirl designs you can do. I just picked 2 of my favorite, and we're going to learn how to quilt those on our panel. So until then, everybody, I hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe, and happy quilting.